Dust billowed across the harsh New Mexico territory as Catherine Winters stood trembling before her father. The verdict was final. She would be given to the imposing Apache warrior as payment for her father's debts. Rumors of Eagle Shadow's brutality had spread throughout the settlement for years. At 6'5", his mere presence struck fear into the hearts of most white settlers. Catherine clutched her mother's silver locket as tears streamed down her face. What she couldn't know was that Eagle Shadow had recognized that locket instantly, the missing piece to a 20-year-old promise that would unravel everything. What terrible secret connected this warrior to her long-dead mother? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dust billowed across the harsh New Mexico territory as Catherine Winters stood trembling before her father. The verdict was final. She would be given to the imposing Apache warrior as payment for her father's debts. Rumors of Eagle Shadow's brutality had spread throughout the settlement for years. At 6'5", his mere presence struck fear into the hearts of most white settlers. Catherine clutched her mother's silver locket as tears streamed down her face. What she couldn't know was that Eagle Shadow had recognized that locket instantly, the missing piece to a 20-year-old promise that would unravel everything. What terrible secret connected this warrior to her long-dead mother? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun beat down mercilessly on the Winters ranch as Catherine stood on the porch, watching her father pace like a caged animal. Thomas Winters had summoned her from the house with a gruff command that brooked no argument. His weathered face, lined with years of hard living and harder drinking, revealed nothing of the storm brewing within. "It's done," he said flatly, refusing to meet her eyes. "Eagle Shadow has accepted my offer. You'll be leaving with him in 3 days' time." Catherine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Father, you cannot be serious. I'm not some cattle to be traded." Thomas slammed his fist against the porch railing. "Damn it, girl. Do you think I have a choice? The bank's taking everything unless I settle my debts. Everything your grandfather built." His voice cracked slightly. "Everything." Catherine's hand instinctively rose to the turquoise bracelet encircling her wrist. Intricate silver and blue stones woven together in a pattern, unlike anything found in the white settlements. The bracelet had appeared mysteriously on her windowsill on her 16th birthday, with no note or explanation. She'd hidden it from her father, somehow knowing he would destroy it if discovered. "There must be another way," she whispered, the bracelet suddenly feeling heavier against her skin. Thomas turned away, reaching for the whiskey bottle that was his constant companion. "There isn't. Not anymore." Inside the house, Margaret, their housekeeper of 20 years, watched from behind the curtain, her dark eyes filled with unspoken knowledge. She remembered the night 10 years ago when Catherine had shown her the bracelet, excitement dancing in the girl's eyes. Margaret had recognized the craftsmanship immediately, but had kept her counsel. Some secrets were best left buried, at least until the right time. On the ridge overlooking the Winters ranch, Eagle Shadow sat motionless on his horse. The white man's dwelling looked small from this distance, like a child's toy. He had watched this place for nearly 2 decades, through changing seasons and passing years. His brother's blood called out from this ground. The turquoise bracelet had been the first message, sent years ago when the girl came of age. A symbol that one day the circle would be completed. Now Thomas Winters had finally reached the end of his desperate trail, just as the tribal elders had prophesied. The debt would at last be paid. Eagle Shadow touched the matching bracelet hidden beneath his buckskin sleeve. The girl would be frightened, angry even. She knew nothing of her true history, of the promises made before her birth, of the blood that flowed in her veins. "Your daughter returns to her people soon," he whispered to the spirit of his brother, carried on the wind. "The daughter you never knew." Back at the ranch, Catherine locked herself in her room, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of the window. In the distance, she thought she saw a lone figure on horseback on the ridge, but when she blinked, there was nothing but the empty landscape stretching toward the mountains where the Apache made their home. She touched the turquoise bracelet, a peculiar calm suddenly washing over her despite her circumstances. Something deep within her stirred, a recognition she couldn't name. As if some part of her had been expecting this day, waiting for it all her life. "Mother," she whispered to the empty room, "what would you do?" But Elizabeth Winters had taken her secrets to the grave 15 years ago, leaving Catherine with nothing but fading memories and unanswered questions. Questions that would soon find their answers in the most unexpected of places. The Winters Ranch had seen better days. Once the pride of the territory, it now stood as a monument to fading dreams and mounting desperation. Catherine moved through the parlor, her fingers trailing over the dusty surfaces of furniture that had once gleamed under her mother's care. 3 years of drought had withered more than just the land. In her father's study, the carved wooden music box sat on the desk, her mother's prized possession. Catherine lifted the delicate lid, and a haunting melody filled the room. Elizabeth Winters had played it often, her eyes distant as if the music transported her somewhere beyond their four walls. After her death, Thomas had nearly thrown it away in a drunken rage. Catherine had rescued it, keeping it hidden until recently, when her father seemed past caring about such things. "He cannot mean to go through with this," Catherine whispered to the empty room. "He's desperate, child." Margaret's voice startled her. The housekeeper stood in the doorway, her dark eyes solemn. "This drought has broken stronger men than your father. So he sells his daughter." Catherine snapped the music box shut, silencing the melody. Margaret's weathered hands twisted in her apron. "There's more to it than you know." "Then tell me." The older woman looked away. "Some stories aren't mine to tell." Catherine turned to the window, watching dust devils dance across the parched earth. She had returned from Boston 2 years ago, abandoning her studies when word came of her father's decline. The educated young woman who had thrived in Eastern society now felt like a stranger in her own home, trapped between worlds. "I remember when Eagle Shadow first came to these parts," Margaret said quietly. "Your mother was still alive then." Catherine turned sharply. "My mother knew him." Something flickered across Margaret's face, caution perhaps, or fear. "I've said too much. Your father would. My father has sold me to a man he claims to despise. I think his right to secrets has been forfeited." Catherine opened the music box again, the melody serving as a shield against the silence that followed her outburst. Margaret sighed. "Your father wasn't always the man you see now. The death of your mother changed him. Some wounds never heal right." Outside, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Catherine moved to the window, her heart racing, but it was only Sheriff Wilson and his deputy, their monthly patrol, a remnant of order in increasingly lawless times. The music box continued its delicate tune as Catherine watched her father emerge from the barn to greet the lawmen. Their conversation seemed tense, with frequent glances toward the distant hills where Apache territory began. "They say Eagle Shadow has never taken a wife," Margaret said suddenly. "Not in all these years. Am I to find comfort in being the first white woman he collects?" Catherine's voice was bitter. "I only mean—" Margaret hesitated. "He is not known for cruelty, whatever the stories say. Fear makes men create monsters where there are only men." Catherine closed the music box again, tracing the intricate carvings with her fingertip. Tiny symbols decorated the edges, patterns she had always assumed were decorative, but now recognized might be something else entirely. Something not unlike the designs on her hidden bracelet. "Why would an Apache warrior want me, Margaret? What could I possibly be worth to him?" The housekeeper looked at the music box, then back to Catherine's face. "Some debts can only be paid one way." In the distance, beyond where the lawman conversed with her father, a lone eagle circled lazily in the thermals rising from the sun-baked earth. Catherine watched it soar, free in a way she had never been. Even in Boston she had felt the invisible tether to this place, to secrets buried in the parched soil of the New Mexico territory. She slipped the small music box into her pocket. Whatever lay ahead in the Apache camp, she would carry this piece of her mother with her. The melody had always soothed her troubled heart, and she suspected the coming days would bring troubles beyond imagining. What she couldn't know was that Eagle Shadow had heard that very melody once before, on a night when stars fell from the sky and promises were made that would shape destinies for generations to come. The attic of the Winters' home had always been Catherine's sanctuary. As a child, she'd hidden among the forgotten treasures when her father's temper flared. Now, with time slipping away before her departure, she returned to this dusty haven, searching for answers among the remnants of her mother's life. A worn leather saddlebag lay partially hidden beneath an old quilt. Catherine had never seen it before, despite her countless hours exploring the attic. She pulled it from its hiding place, dust dancing in the shafts of afternoon light filtering through the small window. The leather was finely worked, with intricate designs burned into its surface, patterns that spoke of a craftsmanship not found in the white settlements. Her fingers trembled as she opened the flap. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in faded calico. Catherine unwrapped it carefully, revealing a ceremonial knife with a bone handle and a blade that still gleamed despite the years. The handle was carved with symbols similar to those on her bracelet and the music box. "Your mother's things should be left in peace," Margaret's voice came from the attic stairs. Catherine didn't look up. "Did you hide this here?" Margaret sighed, making her way across the creaking floorboards. "After she died, your father would have destroyed it in his grief. This knife is Apache work." "Yes." The single word hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Catherine turned the knife over in her hands. "You said my mother knew Eagle Shadow." Margaret lowered herself onto an old trunk, her joints protesting. "I said your father wasn't always the man he is now. The rest you've pieced together yourself. Did she love my father at all?" The question emerged barely above a whisper. Elizabeth was a complicated woman. She had her reasons for the choices she made. Margaret reached for the knife. "This should never have been found. Your father is selling me to an Apache warrior. I deserve to know why." Catherine held the knife away from Margaret's reach. "What aren't you telling me?" The older woman's shoulders sagged. "There are some truths that cut deeper than any blade, child. Sometimes ignorance is mercy. I'm beyond the luxury of mercy." From outside came the sound of galloping hooves. Both women moved to the small window. A young Apache brave rode toward the house at breakneck speed, his face painted for council matters. "He's come to finalize the arrangement," Margaret said, her voice hollow. Catherine watched the rider, a strange calm settling over her. "He looks familiar somehow. That's Running Fox, Eagle Shadow's adopted son. He serves as messenger between the tribe and the settlement." Margaret's gaze lingered on the young man. "He comes here often, watching the ranch from the hills. Why would they watch us?" Margaret turned away. "Ask Eagle Shadow when you go to him." Catherine slipped the knife into the folds of her skirt. "I intend." Downstairs they heard Thomas Winter's voice raised in greeting, a false heartiness fueled by morning whiskey. Catherine descended the stairs slowly, the knife a reassuring weight against her leg. In the parlor, Running Fox stood proud and straight, his eyes finding Catherine immediately. "The woman," he said in perfect English, "is as my father described." Thomas flinched visibly. "Take this and go." He thrust a folded paper at the young brave. "Tell Eagle Shadow the arrangements are unchanged." Running Fox ignored the paper, his eyes still on Catherine. "I will tell my father that Swift Arrow's bloodline remains strong." The name fell into the room like a stone into still water. Thomas staggered back, as if struck. Margaret gasped softly. Catherine felt the name echo inside her like a half-remembered dream. "Get out," Thomas hissed, "and never speak that name in my house again." Running Fox smiled coldly. "Soon it will not be your house, Thomas Winters. The debt comes due." He nodded once to Catherine, a gesture almost like respect. then turned and left as suddenly as he had arrived. Thomas reached for his whiskey bottle with shaking hands. Finding it empty, he hurled it against the wall, glass shattering like the fragile piece of the household. "Father," Catherine said quietly, "who is Swift Arrow?" He looked at her then, truly looked at her perhaps for the first time in years, his eyes haunted by ghosts only he could see. "No one," he whispered. "A ghost, nothing more." But the ceremonial knife hidden in Catherine's skirts told a different story, one written in blood and secrets, in promises made and broken beneath desert stars, one that would soon come full circle when she crossed into Apache lands. The Apache camp lay nestled in a hidden valley, protected by towering red cliffs that seemed to touch the endless blue sky. Eagle Shadow stood before the tribal council fire, the flames casting dancing shadows across his weathered face. He had just announced the imminent arrival of Catherine Winters, and the reaction was exactly as he'd expected. "You bring a white woman into our camp?" Morning Star's voice cut through the murmurs of the gathered elders. Once promised to Eagle Shadow in marriage, she had never forgiven his refusal years ago. "Have you forgotten what the white settlers have done to our people?" Eagle Shadow remained impassive. "I have forgotten nothing." White Hawk, the eldest of the council, raised a gnarled hand for silence. From around his neck, he removed a small deerskin pouch and tossed it into the fire. Sweet-smelling herbs released fragrant smoke that rose in spirals toward the heavens. "The vision bundle speaks," White Hawk said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "Eagle Shadow does not act without purpose." The vision bundle was sacred, a small collection of items gathered during White Hawk's vision quest. As a young man, it was said to contain objects that would shape the tribe's future. When burned, the smoke carried prayers to the ancestors and revealed omens to those who knew how to read them. Morning Star was not appeased. What purpose could this white woman serve, except to bring trouble? "Her father is a drunk who cheats at cards and steals our hunting grounds." "The daughter is not the father," Eagle Shadow replied quietly. He watched the smoke from the vision bundle rise in a straight column, despite the evening breeze, a good sign. Running Fox, who had returned from the Winters ranch, stepped forward. "I have seen her. She wears the turquoise bracelet of our people." A hush fell over the gathering. White Hawk nodded slowly, as if a suspicion had been confirmed. "The circle begins to close," the old man murmured. Eagle Shadow turned to face the tribe. 18 summers ago, I made a sacred promise. The time has come to fulfill it." From within his buckskin shirt, he withdrew a small object, wrapped in soft rabbit fur. Unwrapping it carefully, he revealed a carved stone figure, a small bear fetish, polished by years of handling. Its eyes were two tiny pieces of turquoise that caught the firelight. "My brother carried this into battle," Eagle Shadow said, his voice dropping so that the others leaned forward to hear. "It was returned to me with his body." White Hawk reached for the fetish, examining it with his clouded eyes. Swift Arrow's spirit guide. He believed it would protect him. "It failed," Morning Star said coldly. Eagle Shadow reclaimed the bear fetish, his fingers closing around it. "No, the white man's bullet found him because it was his time. But his blood calls for balance." "Blood calls for blood," one of the younger warriors muttered. "No." Eagle Shadow's voice was sharp. "Swift Arrow did not walk the path of vengeance. Neither shall we." Running Fox stepped closer to his adoptive father. "The white woman, she knows nothing of her true blood." "Nothing," Eagle Shadow confirmed. "Thomas Winters has buried the truth deep." Morning Star's eyes narrowed. "What truth?" White Hawk raised his hand again, commanding silence. "The smoke speaks. The girl of two worlds will soon walk among us. The paths of healing and destruction both lie before her. The choice will be hers alone." Eagle Shadow tucked the bear fetish back inside his shirt, close to his heart where it had rested for 18 years. "I will ride tomorrow to bring Catherine Winters to our people. She will be treated with respect." His gaze swept the gathering. lingering on the more hostile faces. Any who dishonor her dishonor me and the memory of Swift Arrow. As the council dispersed, Morning Star approached Eagle Shadow, her voice low and bitter. You still mourn your brother after all these years. Does this white woman bear such a resemblance to him that you would risk our safety for her? Eagle Shadow looked toward the distant mountains where the Winters ranch lay. What I do for the good of our people. So you have always said. Morning Star followed his gaze. Let us hope this white woman is worth the price we may all pay. Later, alone in his dwelling, Eagle Shadow held Swift Arrow's bare fetish to the light of a single flame. The turquoise eyes seemed alive, watching him as he prepared for what lay ahead. The circle will be complete, my brother, he whispered. Your daughter returns to her true people at last. Dawn broke hesitantly over the Winters ranch, as if the sun itself was reluctant to witness what the day would bring. Catherine stood on the porch, a small carpet bag at her feet, containing the few possessions she deemed worth taking: her mother's music box, a change of clothes, a worn copy of Emerson's essays from her time in Boston. The ceremonial knife was hidden in the folds of her skirt, a secret weight against her thigh. The household had awakened in silence, the usual morning routines performed like a solemn ritual. Margaret had prepared breakfast that no one ate. Thomas had emerged from his room looking haggard, the night's drinking evident in his bloodshot eyes. Now he stood in the doorway, shifting uncomfortably from one foot to the other. Catherine, he began, then faltered. She turned to him, her face composed. These past 3 days, she had cycled through rage, despair, and finally a strange calm, born of determination. Yes, father. Thomas disappeared into the house, returning moments later with a small wooden box. This was your grandfather's, he said, thrusting it toward her. Catherine accepted the box, opening it carefully. Inside lay an old Navy Colt revolver, its barrel gleaming with recent oiling. Beside it rested a leather pouch of ammunition. You know how to use it, Thomas said. It wasn't a question. He had taught her to shoot years ago, an unusual skill for a young woman, but necessary in these territories. Am I to understand you're giving me permission to shoot Eagle Shadow if he mistreats me? The irony was not lost on her. Thomas flinched. Just keep it close. The territories are dangerous. I believe I'm about to discover just how dangerous. She closed the box, tucking it into her carpet bag. The gesture felt final somehow, like closing the door on her life as Thomas Winter's daughter. Margaret emerged from the house, her eyes red-rimmed. She carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Some dried apple tarts for the journey, she explained, though they both knew food was the least of Catherine's concerns. Thank you for everything, Margaret. Catherine embraced the older woman, whispering in her ear. Look for the markings on the knife. They're the same as on Mother's music box. Margaret stiffened slightly, then nodded against Catherine's shoulder. Be watchful, child. Not everything is as it seems. A cloud of dust on the horizon announced approaching riders. Thomas straightened, his hand instinctively moving to his own sidearm, before dropping away. There would be no resistance today. The debt would be paid. Eagle Shadow rode at the front, his imposing figure silhouetted against the morning sky. Behind him came Running Fox and another warrior. Catherine didn't recognize. They approached slowly, with dignity rather than triumph, stopping at a respectful distance from the house. Catherine felt a strange flutter in her stomach as Eagle Shadow dismounted. In the clear morning light, she could see his features plainly for the first time. There was something in the set of his jaw, the angle of his cheekbones, that tugged at her memory like a half-forgotten dream. Catherine Winters, he said, his deep voice carrying across the yard. It is time. Thomas stepped forward, his movement stiff. The arrangement is fulfilled when she crosses onto Apache land. Not before. Eagle Shadow's expression remained impassive. She will be treated with honor. See that she is? Thomas turned to Catherine, and for a moment she glimpsed something in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or fear. Goodbye, daughter, The word rang hollow after years of emotional distance. Catherine nodded once, unable to summon false sentiment for this farewell. She picked up her carpet bag, the revolver box a hard edge against the fabric. Margaret pressed something into her hand, a small mirror compact of tarnished silver. "Your mother's," she whispered. "Sometimes to find the truth, you must see yourself clearly." Catherine slipped the compact into her pocket, then walked steadily toward the waiting Apache party. Eagle Shadow watched her approach, his dark eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. When she reached him, he extended his hand to help her mount the spare horse they had brought. His fingers were calloused but gentle. As their hands touched, Catherine felt an inexplicable jolt of recognition. Eagle Shadow felt it too. She saw the slight widening of his eyes before his expression smoothed once more into careful neutrality. "We ride north," he said simply, releasing her hand. Catherine settled onto the horse, tucking the mirror compact deeper into her pocket. Whatever reflections it might reveal, she was ready to face them. Behind her, the Winters ranch grew smaller with each hoofbeat, fading like a mirage in the desert heat. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher in the vast New Mexico sky. Catherine sat straight in her saddle, refusing to show weakness despite the growing ache in her muscles. Boston had softened her for riding, and 2 years back at the ranch hadn't fully restored her frontier endurance. Eagle Shadow led the way, his broad back a wall between Catherine and whatever future awaited her. Running Fox rode beside her, occasionally casting curious glances in her direction. The third warrior trailed behind, watchful of their surroundings. When they stopped at midday beside a small creek, Catherine dismounted without assistance, though her legs trembled traitorously. She moved to the water's edge, cupping her hands to drink the cool, clear liquid. Eagle Shadow approached, carrying something wrapped in buckskin. "You should eat," he said, unwrapping a package of dried meat and corn cakes. Catherine accepted the food warily. "Thank you," he nodded once, then reached into a pouch at his waist. "The journey is long. This will help." In his palm lay a small stone canteen, carved from a single piece of pale green soapstone. Intricate designs covered its surface, and a leather strap allowed it to be worn across the body. "It was my mother's," he said, offering it to her. "The water stays cool, even in the desert heat." Catherine hesitated before accepting the canteen. Their fingers brushed again, and again came that strange jolt of recognition. She pulled away quickly, examining the stone vessel. "Your English is excellent," she observed, filling the canteen from the creek. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Did you expect me to speak in grunts and broken phrases like in your dime novels?" Heat rushed to her cheeks. "I didn't mean. I was educated by missionaries before I returned to my people," he explained, cutting off her apology. "Many of us speak your language better than you might imagine." Running Fox approached, dropping to a crouch beside them. "My father insisted I learn the white man's tongue," he said. "He believes understanding your enemies gives you power over them." Eagle Shadow's expression hardened. "Catherine is not our enemy." "No?" Running Fox's gaze was challenging. "Then what is she, father?" The question hung in the air between them. Catherine looked from one man to the other, sensing currents she couldn't yet navigate. "She is our guest," Eagle Shadow said finally, "and will be treated accordingly." Catherine traced the patterns on the soapstone canteen with her fingertip. "These designs, they're similar to those on my mother's music box." She hadn't meant to speak the thought aloud. Eagle Shadow went very still. "Your mother had a music box?" "Yes." Catherine watched his face carefully, with patterns carved around the edges like these. Running Fox looked to his father, clearly noting his reaction. Eagle Shadow's expression had grown guarded again. "Many things are traded between our peoples," he said dismissively, though something in his tone rang false. Catherine pressed on. "You knew my mother, didn't you?" "Margaret, our housekeeper," she implied as much. "We should continue." Eagle Shadow rose abruptly. "There are still many miles before nightfall." As they mounted and resumed their journey, Catherine slung the soapstone canteen across her body. Its weight against her hip was strangely comforting, like a talisman against uncertainty. The landscape changed as they traveled, the scrubby plains giving way to rocky foothills. They followed game trails invisible to Catherine's untrained eye, moving deeper into territory she had never ventured. "There," Running Fox said suddenly, pointing to a distant plume of dust. "Riders." Eagle Shadow raised a hand, and their small party halted. "White men. 4, maybe 5. Catherine squinted against the sunlight. "How can you tell they're white?" "Apache ride differently," Running Fox explained. "And our horses are chosen for endurance, not speed." The distant riders changed course, heading directly toward them. Eagle Shadow muttered something in Apache to the third warrior, who nodded and disappeared into a nearby ravine. "We will meet them," Eagle Shadow decided, turning to Catherine. "Say nothing unless I instruct you to." The approaching riders materialized into 4 men, their manner and dress marking them as ranch hands from one of the larger spreads. They slowed as they recognized Eagle Shadow, hands drifting to their weapons. "Well, look what we have here," the lead rider called out, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Injuns traveling with a white woman. Now ain't that interesting?" Catherine clutched the soapstone canteen like a lifeline, feeling the carved symbols beneath her fingers. Whatever protection it had offered Eagle Shadow's mother, she prayed it might extend to her as the 2 worlds she straddled collided on this dusty trail. Tension crackled in the air like heat lightning. The 4 ranch hands spread out slightly, a calculated movement that didn't escape Eagle Shadow's notice. Catherine felt his posture shift subtly, readying himself while appearing relaxed. "This here's Winter's daughter, ain't it?" The lead rider, a weathered man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, leaned forward in his saddle. "Words out your daddy traded you to the savages." "Didn't believe it till now." Catherine lifted her chin. "My arrangements are none of your concern, Mr. Hawkins." Foreman at the circle. His gaze slid from Catherine to Eagle Shadow. "Didn't know Indians were in the market for white women these days." Running Fox bristled, but Eagle Shadow remained still as stone. "We pass through to our lands. We seek no trouble." "Funny thing about trouble," Hawkins drawled. "It has a way of finding certain folk." His hand rested casually near his holster. "Miss Winters, if you're being taken against your will, now would be the time to say so." Before Catherine could respond, Eagle Shadow. "The arrangement was made with Thomas Winters. It is honored." "Arrangement?" Hawkins spat on the ground. "That what they call selling your own blood now?" Catherine met the foreman's gaze steadily. "I go willingly, Mr. Hawkins. Please stand aside." Doubt flickered across Hawkins' face. One of his men muttered something, and another laughed. A harsh, ugly sound that made Catherine's skin crawl. "Seems a shame," Hawkins said slowly. "Educated girl like you, ending up as some buck squaw." Eagle Shadow's voice was dangerously soft. "You dishonor yourself with such words." The third Apache warrior had reappeared silently on a ridge above them, bow drawn and ready. Catherine wondered if the ranch hands had noticed. Hawkins straightened in his saddle. "Just offering the lady a choice. She wants to come with us. Circle men would treat her proper." "I've made my choice," Catherine said firmly, though her heart hammered in her chest. Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around her mother's silver compact mirror. Its solid weight gave her courage. A tense moment stretched between them. Then Hawkins shrugged elaborately. "Your funeral, Miss Winters." He jerked his head at his men, and they moved their horses aside. "Don't come crying to civilized folk when you learn what life's really like with these devils." As they rode past, Catherine caught Hawkins watching her with an expression that sent ice down her spine. This wasn't over, merely postponed. They rode in tense silence until the ranch hands were well behind them. Only then did Eagle Shadow signal to the warrior on the ridge, who melted back into the landscape. "You handled yourself well," Eagle Shadow said, surprising Catherine. "I've dealt with men like Hawkins before." She withdrew the mirror from her pocket, catching a glimpse of her face flushed and determined. Running Fox edged his horse closer. They will bring others. The white men fear what they do not understand. And what is it they don't understand? Catherine asked. Why one of their women would choose to live among the people. I didn't choose this, she reminded him sharply. Running Fox's expression was unreadable. Yet you told the scarred man you go willingly. Catherine had no answer for that contradiction. Instead, she opened the compact mirror fully, angling it to catch the sunlight. A sudden flash reflected off the polished surface, momentarily dazzling. Careful, Eagle Shadow cautioned. Such signals can be seen for miles. Catherine snapped the mirror shut. I wasn't signaling. No. His dark eyes studied her. Then perhaps you were looking to see if you recognized yourself still. The observation was too perceptive. Catherine tucked the mirror away, unsettled. As dusk approached, the terrain grew more rugged. They climbed a narrow path that wound between towering red rock formations. At the summit, Eagle Shadow halted, gesturing for Catherine to join him at the edge of the overlook. Below, nestled in a protected valley, lay the Apache encampment, larger and more organized than she had imagined. Smoke from cooking fires drifted upward, in the still evening air. Children played between carefully arranged dwellings. Women moved about their evening tasks. This is my home, Eagle Shadow said quietly. It will be yours now too. Catherine felt dizzy at the edge of this precipice, both the physical one before her and the unseen one she was about to cross. The mirror in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with significance. Who would she see reflected in its surface after living among the people? Would she recognize the woman she would become? As if reading her thoughts, Eagle Shadow added, sometimes we must look beyond reflections to find truth. The sun dipped below the western mountains as they descended into the valley, casting long shadows before them. Catherine felt countless eyes tracking their approach, watching as the white woman entered their domain, a woman who carried secrets in her blood that even she did not yet understand. Catherine's first week in the Apache camp passed in a blur of new experiences. She had been given a small dwelling on the eastern edge of the encampment, close enough to be protected, far enough to afford her privacy. The structure was surprisingly comfortable, with woven mats covering the hard-packed earth, and a small fire pit that kept the night chill at bay. Each morning a woman named Singing Bird arrived to guide Catherine through the day. Though initially reserved, Singing Bird's patience seemed endless as she taught Catherine the basics of camp life: where to collect water, how to tend the fire, which plants were gathered for food and medicine. You learn quickly, Singing Bird observed on the 7th morning, demonstrating how to grind acorn meal. Most white women would still be crying for their feather beds. Catherine smiled wryly. The Winter's ranch was hardly a palace. Singing Bird's hands worked steadily, the stone pestle moving in rhythmic circles. Eagle Shadow says you were educated in the East. Boston, I studied literature and natural philosophy. Singing Bird nodded thoughtfully. Yet you understand how to work with your hands. This is good. From across the central clearing, Catherine noticed Morning Star watching them. The woman's hostility was thinly veiled, her dark eyes following Catherine's movements with suspicion. She was to marry Eagle Shadow once, Singing Bird said, following Catherine's gaze, before he refused all marriage offers. Why would he do that? Catherine asked, trying to sound merely curious. Some say he made a promise that prevents him from taking a wife. Singing Bird lowered her voice. Others believe he still mourns his brother. Swift Arrow, Catherine said without thinking. Singing Bird's hands froze mid-motion. Who spoke that name to you? Running Fox mentioned it at my father's ranch. Catherine chose her words carefully. My father reacted strongly. Names of the dead are not spoken lightly among our people. Singing Bird resumed her work, but her expression had grown guarded. Especially those who died before their time. Before Catherine could press further, Running Fox approached, carrying something wrapped in soft deerskin. My father asks that you join the council fire tonight, he said without preamble. White Hawk wishes to meet you properly. Catherine nodded. I would be honored. You will need this. Running Fox handed her the wrapped bundle. It belonged to a woman who once lived among us. Catherine unwrapped the package carefully. Inside lay a beautifully crafted hair comb, carved from elk antler. Delicate figures danced across its surface, women with their arms upraised toward a crescent moon. "It's beautiful," Catherine murmured, running her fingers across the smooth surface. "It is a woman's comb for ceremonial gatherings." Running Fox's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a challenge. "We thought it might serve you better than your white woman's trinkets." As he walked away, Singing Bird clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "He tests you. Many of the young ones do. And what is the proper response to such tests?" Catherine asked, still holding the comb. "Dignity, strength." Singing Bird smiled slightly. "You already show both." That evening, Catherine used the stream's reflection to help place the antler comb in her hair. The effect transformed her appearance subtly. Less a white settler's daughter, more a woman of uncertain origin. The thought was both disturbing and strangely liberating. The council fire blazed in the center of the encampment. As Catherine approached, conversations hushed. Eagle Shadow rose to meet her, his face unreadable in the flickering light. "You wear the comb well," he said quietly. "Running Fox said it belonged to someone who once lived here." Something flickered in Eagle Shadow's eyes. "Many have lived among us over the generation." He led her to a place near the fire, where an elderly man sat wrapped in a blanket, despite the evening warmth. White Hawk's face was deeply lined, his eyes clouded with age, but sharp with intelligence. "So," the old man said in English as perfect as Eagle Shadow's, "Swift Arrow's blood returns to us." A murmur rippled through the gathered tribe members. Catherine felt a chill despite the fire's heat. "I don't understand," she said, touching the antler comb self-conscious. White Hawk reached out with gnarled fingers, brushing them against the comb in Catherine's hair. "She wore this when she danced with our women under the spring moon, before she chose the white man's world." Catherine's breath caught. But White Hawk had closed his eyes, his head tilting as if listening to distant voices. "The circle breaks, the circle mends, what was scattered returns." Eagle Shadow placed a steadying hand on Catherine's shoulder. "There will be time for all truth." As the night deepened, tribal members shared stories in their native tongue, occasionally translated by Singing Bird. Catherine felt the antler comb like a weight in her hair, a connection to some woman who had come before her, who had perhaps sat at this very fire, a woman who might have been her mother. The following evening, Eagle Shadow found Catherine sitting alone outside her dwelling, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls crimson. 2 weeks had passed since her arrival, and questions still outnumbered answers. "Walk with me," he said. Not a command, but not quite a request either. Catherine followed him to a secluded clearing, where a small fire had been prepared. White Hawk waited there, seated on a woven blanket. Beside him lay a weathered leather journal, its cover darkened with age and handling. "Sit." White Hawk gestured to a place across the fire. "The time for partial truths has ended." Catherine lowered herself onto the ground, her heart quickening. Eagle Shadow remained standing, his tall figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight. "This belonged to your mother," White Hawk said, pushing the journal toward her. "She left it when she departed our people." Catherine's hands trembled as she reached for the journal. The leather was soft beneath her fingers, worn smooth by time. "My mother lived among the Apache for nearly 2 years." White Hawk's clouded eyes seemed to look into the past. "She came as a young woman, separated from a wagon train. Swift Arrow found her half dead from thirst and brought her to our camp." "Swift Arrow," Catherine repeated softly. The name that had provoked such reaction from her father now fell from her lips like a half-remembered dream. "My brother," Eagle Shadow said, finally sitting beside her. "He was 19 summers when he found Elizabeth Harris, the woman you knew as your mother." Catherine opened the journal. Inside, page after page was filled with her mother's familiar handwriting. Pressed flowers fell from between the pages, desert blooms preserved through the years. Sketches of plants, people, and daily life in the Apache camp filled the margins. "She learned our ways," White Hawk continued. "Our language, our medicine. She had a gift for healing that even our own medicine women respected." Catherine found a page where her mother had drawn a man's face, strong features, proud bearing, eyes that seemed to look directly at the viewer with intensity. Beneath it, in her mother's elegant script, "Swift arrow under the juniper tree. The winds speak his name. She loved him," Catherine whispered, statement rather than a question. Eagle Shadow nodded once, and he loved her. They planned to create a life together, here with our people. Then what happened? Catherine turned another page, finding drawings of the ceremonial knife she now carried hidden in her skirt. White Hawk took a small pouch from around his neck and emptied sacred herbs into the fire. Fragrant smoke rose in a straight column toward the darkening sky. "Thomas Winters happened," he said, his voice heavy with old sorrow. "A young rancher then, ambitious and determined. He found this camp while hunting. Saw Elizabeth." Eagle Shadow's face hardened in the firelight. He wanted her for himself. Catherine's fingers tightened on the journal. "Did he take her by force?" "No." Eagle Shadow stared into the flames. He returned many times, bringing gifts, speaking honeyed words. "Your mother was conflicted. The pull of her own world was strong. She chose to leave." Catherine couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. White Hawk raised a weathered hand. "The story is not so simple," Swift Arrow and Thomas Winters argued. "Threats were made, and then, my brother was found dead," Eagle Shadow said flatly. "Shot in the back while hunting. No witness but the eagles." Catherine felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her. "My father killed him. We had no proof." Eagle Shadow's voice was controlled, but rage simmered beneath the surface. 2 days after Swift Arrow's death, Elizabeth disappeared from our camp. A month later, she was Thomas Winters' wife. Catherine stared down at her mother's journal, at the loving drawings of a man she had never known. "Why are you telling me this now?" White Hawk's eyes found hers across the fire. "Because you need to understand why you are here." "A debt," Catherine said bitterly. "My father's final payment." "No." Eagle Shadow's voice softened. "Not just a debt." White Hawk reached across and turned to the final page of the journal. There, in handwriting less steady than the earlier entries, was a single line: "My child carries Swift Arrow's blood. May the Creator forgive what I must do to protect this life." The world seemed to stop as Catherine read the words, then read them again. Understanding bloomed within her, like a desert flower after rain. "Swift Arrow was my father," she whispered. "Not Thomas Winters." Eagle Shadow, her uncle by blood, nodded solemnly. "Now you understand why I claimed you, not as payment, but as family returned to us at last." Catherine spent the night alone in her dwelling, her mother's journal open beside her as she stared into the small fire. Sleep refused to come as the foundations of her identity crumbled and reformed. She was not Catherine Winters, daughter of Thomas. She was the child of Swift Arrow and Elizabeth, born of 2 worlds that had never stopped colliding. Dawn found her still awake, eyes red-rimmed but clear. When Singing Bird arrived with fresh water, she found Catherine grinding herbs with methodical precision. "You know," Singing Bird said, observing the careful way Catherine worked with the plants. "Yes." No further explanation seemed necessary. "It is why I was assigned to you." Singing Bird sat beside her. "I knew your mother when she lived among us. I was just a girl then, but I remember her kindness." Catherine's hands stilled. "What was she like here? Was she happy?" "Very happy. Until the end." Singing Bird's eyes grew distant with memory. "She and Swift Arrow would walk by the stream, speaking of the future. She learned our medicines, taught us some of hers." She paused. "After he died and she left, some said she was a witch who had brought misfortune. But White Hawk always silenced such talk." "And my father, Swift Arrow, what was he like?" "Proud, strong, quick to laugh." Singing Bird smiled sadly. "Much like his brother, though Eagle Shadow rarely laughs now." Their conversation was interrupted by Running Fox, who approached with purpose in his stride. "My father asks that you join him. There is news from the White Settlement." Catherine found Eagle Shadow near the horses, securing supplies to a pack animal. His expression was grave. Thomas Winters is ill, he said without preamble. Margaret sent word through a trusted trader. She believes he may not recover. Catherine felt a confusing swirl of emotions, anger at the man who had lied to her all her life, yet lingering obligation to the only father she had known. "I should go to him," she said finally. Eagle Shadow nodded, as if expecting this response. "I will accompany you. Is that wise? After what he did to Swift Arrow, some circles must be completed in person." He handed her a small object. "This may help you face what lies ahead." In her palm lay a smooth stone amulet on a leather cord. The stone was polished obsidian, jet black and reflective, carved with a symbol she now recognized as a protection sign. "Swift Arrow made this for your mother," Eagle Shadow explained. "She left it behind when she departed, perhaps fearing Thomas would recognize it. It is yours by right." Catherine slipped the cord over her head, the obsidian amulet cool against her skin. "Thank you." As they prepared to leave, Morning Star approached, her expression unusually subdued. "So you return to your white father after all." "I go to face him with the truth," Catherine replied, surprised by her own calm certainty. Morning Star studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps there is more of Swift Arrow in you than I first believed." She offered a small pouch of dried herbs. "For healing, your mother once showed our medicine women how to prepare this mixture." The gesture, unexpected and touching, left Catherine momentarily speechless. She accepted the pouch with a nod of thanks. As they rode out of the camp, Catherine found herself touching the obsidian amulet repeatedly, drawing strength from its smooth surface. The knowledge of her true heritage had not simplified her life, but had instead illuminated its complexity. She was neither fully of the white world nor fully Apache. She existed in the space between, a bridge across a divide that had claimed her parents. "What will happen when Thomas dies?" she asked, as they crossed into territory that bordered the settlements. Eagle Shadow was silent for several moments. "That depends on many things. The new Indian agent has been pressing all tribes to relocate to reservations further west. The settlers want our lands, and if I were to speak for both sides, as someone of both bloodlines," he glanced at her, something like pride flickering in his eyes, "it would be dangerous. Many whites would reject you for your Apache blood. Some of our people would distrust your white upbringing. Yet here we are, you and I, proof that the two worlds need not always be at war." Eagle Shadow touched the bear fetish he carried. Swift Arrow believed the same. It cost him his life. Catherine fingered the obsidian amulet, feeling its protective energy flow through her. Perhaps his daughter can finish what he began. They rode in companionable silence after that, the miles passing beneath their horses' hooves, as Catherine prepared herself to confront the man who had raised her and who had kept her from her true heritage. The obsidian amulet seemed to grow warmer, her skin, as if the spirits of her real parents rode with her, guiding her toward a truth long overdue. The Winters ranch appeared unchanged yet somehow diminished as Catherine and Eagle Shadow approached. What had once been the only home she knew now seemed like a stranger's dwelling, a place that had harbored secrets and lies beneath its weathered exterior. Margaret rushed onto the porch as they dismounted, her face lined with worry and relief. Catherine thanked the Lord. Her gaze flickered uncertainly to Eagle Shadow before returning to Catherine. "Your father's taken a bad turn. The doctor's been, but where is he?" Catherine asked, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders despite everything. "In his room. Hasn't left it in 3 days." Margaret lowered her voice. "He's been asking for you, calling your name in his sleep." Catherine nodded, then turned to Eagle Shadow. "Wait here. I need to see him alone first." His expression remained impassive, but she caught the slight tension in his jaw. After a moment, he inclined his head in agreement. The interior of the house was stifling, windows closed against the dust and heat. Catherine paused in the hallway, gathering herself before pushing open the door to her father's, to Thomas's bedroom. The smell hit her first, sickness and whiskey and desperation. Thomas Winters lay in his bed, a shell of the imposing man he had once been. His skin had a yellow tinge, and his breathing came in labored gasps. Beside the bed stood a small table bearing a tarnished cavalry flask, a relic from Thomas's brief military service before he established the ranch. The flask had been a constant companion throughout Catherine's childhood, disappearing only during her mother's final illness when Thomas had temporarily forsworn drinking. "Father," she said softly, the words strange on her tongue now that she knew the truth. Thomas's eyes fluttered open, rheumy and unfocused. "Lizzie," he whispered hoarsely, "you came back." "It's Catherine," she corrected, moving closer to the bed. Recognition dawned slowly. "Catherine, you came back." He struggled to sit up. "The Indian, did he hurt you?" "Eagle Shadow has treated me with nothing but respect." She sat in the chair beside the bed. "Which is more than I can say for you." Thomas sank back against the pillows. "You know," he said. "It wasn't a question. I know that Swift Arrow was my father. I know that you took my mother after his death." Catherine's voice remained steady, though emotion threatened to overwhelm her. "Did you kill him?" Thomas's hand reached for the cavalry flask, a gesture so ingrained it seemed involuntary. Catherine placed it just beyond his reach. "Answer me. Did you murder Swift Arrow?" "I loved your mother," Thomas whispered, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. "From the moment I saw her in that savage camp, she was like a vision, educated, beautiful, trapped among those people. She wasn't trapped. She loved him." Thomas's laugh turned into a hacking cough. She was confused, grateful to them for saving her life. "I showed her she could return to her own kind, live a proper life." And Swift Arrow. A long silence filled the room. Finally, Thomas turned his gaze to Catherine. "I didn't go hunting that day, intending to kill him. But when I saw him alone," his voice trailed off. "It was so easy. One shot. He never even knew I was there." Catherine felt ice in her veins. "And my mother," she suspected, "never knew for certain." Thomas reached again for the flask, and this time Catherine didn't stop him. His hands shook as he unscrewed the cap. When she realized she was carrying his child, I offered her protection, respectability." "You threatened her," Catherine corrected, remembering her mother's journal. "She feared for her unborn child." Thomas took a long swallow from the flask. "I gave you my name, raised you as my own, sent you east for education no half-breed girl would otherwise receive, and then traded me back to the people you stole me from." The bitter irony wasn't lost on Catherine. "Debts," Thomas muttered. "The drought, the gambling. When Eagle Shadow came offering to clear what I owed in exchange for you." He shrugged weakly. It seemed fitting somehow. The circle closing. Catherine stared at the man who had shaped her life through deception. "Eagle Shadow knew I was his niece all along. He wasn't claiming a debt, he was reclaiming family." Thomas's eyes widened slightly. "He knew. He's known since I was born. He's been watching over me, over us for years." Thomas's fingers tightened around the cavalry flask, his knuckles white. "He's here now, isn't he? Come to watch me die." "He's here because I asked him to come." Catherine stood. "I'll send Margaret to tend to you." "Catherine," Thomas called, as she reached the door. "I did love you in my way." She paused, her back to the dying man. "I believe you did, but love built on lies is a weak foundation, Father." The cavalry flask slipped from Thomas's grasp as Catherine closed the door behind her, the dull thud of metal against wood floor, echoing like the final punctuation on a life of deception. Catherine found Eagle Shadow standing by the corral, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He turned as she approached, reading the truth of her conversation with Thomas in her expression. "He admitted it," she said simply. "He killed Swift Arrow, shot him in the back while hunting." Eagle Shadow's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, old pain briefly resurfacing before being submerged again. "I have known this in my heart for 18 years. Why didn't you seek justice?" Catherine asked. Vengeance? What would more bloodshed have accomplished? He looked toward the house, and there was you to consider. Swift Arrow's child. They stood in silence as twilight deepened around them. Finally, Catherine spoke. Thomas is dying. The doctor says it's his liver. Years of drinking. The spirits have their own justice. Eagle Shadow observed. Margaret approached from the house, her step hesitant. Miss Catherine, there's something you should see. She held out a folded document, yellowed with age. Your father, Mr. Winters, asked me to give you this. Catherine unfolded the paper carefully. It was a land deed to the Winters ranch, dated 2 weeks earlier, with her name listed as the sole owner. He transferred everything to me, she said, surprised, before he sent me away. Margaret nodded. He may have sold you, but he made sure you'd have something to return to. Things didn't work out. Eagle Shadow studied the document over Catherine's shoulder. This land borders Apache territory to the north and west. Yes, Margaret confirmed, including the disputed water rights at Crow Creek. Catherine refolded the deed thoughtfully. Thomas knew what he was doing. Giving me this land creates a buffer between the settlers and the Apache. A rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Sheriff Wilson, his expression grim as he dismounted and approached their small group. Miss Winters, he nodded curtly, then glared at Eagle Shadow. Didn't expect to find you here, Indian. Sheriff, Catherine acknowledged coolly. What brings you out this way? Wilson adjusted his gun belt, a habitual gesture that seemed more pointed in Eagle Shadow's presence. News from town. Armies sending troops to pacify the region. Orders came direct from the territorial governor after that raid on the Miller place. What raid? Catherine demanded. When? 3 days ago. Family massacred. Livestock taken. Wilson's eyes narrowed at Eagle Shadow. Apache-style killing, they say. Eagle Shadow's expression darkened. My people conducted no raid. We have maintained the peace. Tell that to the Millers. Wilson spat. Oh, wait. You can't. They're all dead. Catherine stepped between them. Sheriff, I know the Apache haven't been raiding. I've been living among them for weeks now. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. Living among them? Voluntarily? Yes. Catherine held his gaze steadily. And I can assure you Eagle Shadow's band has remained peaceful. Well, somebody's stirring up trouble, and the army ain't particularly concerned with which band of Indians they subdue. Wilson looked pointedly at the ranch house. How's your father? Dying, Catherine said bluntly. Something like satisfaction flickered across Wilson's face. Shame. Territory's losing a good man. After the sheriff departed, Catherine unfolded the land deed again, studying it in the fading light. This land could become a sanctuary, neutral ground between the settlers and the Apache. A noble vision, Eagle Shadow said cautiously. But the white authorities will not easily accept such an arrangement. Margaret touched Catherine's arm. There's something else you should know. In your father's study, a letter came from the Indian Agency. I think you should read it. In Thomas's study, dust motes danced in the last rays of sunlight streaming through the window. On the desk lay an official envelope, already opened. Catherine withdrew the letter inside, scanning its contents with growing alarm. The government is unilaterally voiding all previous agreements with the Apache, she summarized for Eagle Shadow. They plan to relocate all tribes to the reservation at San Carlos. Effective immediately, Eagle Shadow's face hardened. Many would die there. The land is poor, the water worse. Catherine continued reading, then stiffened. There's more. A company of soldiers arrives next week to begin the relocation. She looked up, meeting Eagle Shadow's gaze. They'll force your people out at gunpoint if necessary. My people will not go willingly to a slow death at San Carlos, Eagle Shadow said quietly. Catherine set the letter down, her decision crystallizing. Then we have 1 week to find another solution. She touched the land deed, an idea forming. And I believe I may have the beginnings of one. The letter lay on the desk between them, its official seal gleaming dully in the dying light. a harbinger of conflict that threatened to destroy everything, unless Catherine could forge a new path between the colliding worlds of her heritage. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Catherine sat beside Thomas's bed, watching him drift between consciousness and fevered dreams. 3 days had passed since her return to the ranch, days filled with urgent planning and growing dread as the deadline for the Apache relocation drew nearer. "Elizabeth," Thomas murmured, reaching for a hand that wasn't there. "I'm sorry." Catherine remained silent, knowing he wasn't seeing her. In his delirium, Thomas had been conversing with ghosts, primarily her mother, occasionally Swift Arrow, whose name now fell from his lips without the hatred that had colored it in health. Margaret entered with a basin of cool water and fresh cloths. "No change?" "His fever's rising." Catherine moved aside to let Margaret tend to him. "The doctor says it's only a matter of time. He's been asking for the box." Margaret nodded toward the bedside table. "Won't rest until he sees it." Catherine's gaze fell on a small wooden box, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. It had appeared among Thomas's belongings yesterday, brought from a hiding place, known only to him. Inside lay a single tintype photograph. Catherine had never seen before. Her mother, younger than Catherine had ever known her, standing beside a tall Apache man, whose proud bearing and gentle eyes immediately identified him as Swift Arrow. "He kept this all these years," Catherine said softly, opening the box to look at the photograph again. "Hidden away like a shameful secret, or a treasure he couldn't bear to destroy," Margaret suggested, her hands wringing out a cloth. "Your father was a complicated man." "He wasn't my father." The words still felt strange on Catherine's tongue. Margaret's hands stilled. "He raised you as his own. That counts for something, even with all the rest." Thomas stirred, his eyes opening with sudden clarity. "Catherine." "I'm here," she answered, moving closer to the bed. "The box." His voice was weak, but urgent. "I have it." She held up the small wooden container so he could see it. Relief softened his haggard features. "There's a false bottom. Press the left corner." Catherine examined the box more carefully, finding a nearly invisible seam. When she pressed the corner as instructed, a hidden compartment opened, revealing a folded piece of paper and a small brass key. "What is this?" she asked, unfolding the paper to find a hand-drawn map. "Insurance," Thomas whispered, against the day when words on paper wouldn't be enough. The map showed the northern section of Winter's ranch land, with an area circled near the border of Apache territory. Notations in Thomas's handwriting marked depths and measurements. "A silver deposit," he explained, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Found it years ago. Never registered the claim. Too close to Apache land. Too much trouble." A coughing fit interrupted him. When he continued, his voice was fainter. "The key opens a strong box in the bank. Assayer's report. Proof." Catherine stared at the map in disbelief. "You've known about this silver all along?" Even when the ranch was failing, Thomas's laugh was a dry rattle. "Ironic, isn't it? Man spends his life cheating at cards, drinking away his fortune when real wealth was under his feet." His eyes drifted to the tintype in the box. "Some treasures you can't bring yourself to spend." Margaret touched Catherine's shoulder. "I'll fetch some broth. He needs to keep up his strength." Alone with Thomas, Catherine studied the map more carefully. "Why show me this now?" Bargaining chip. Thomas's gaze was surprisingly lucid. "Government wants Apache land. Settlers want silver. You now control both." Understanding dawned. "You're giving me the means to protect the Apache, giving you a choice I never had." His eyes closed briefly. "Your mother would have wanted that." Catherine looked at the photograph again, at the woman who had lived between two worlds and the man whose blood ran in her veins. "You could have told me the truth years ago." "Pride," Thomas whispered. "Fear. Easier to hate than to admit." His voice trailed off. "Admit what?" "That she never loved me as she loved him. That you were never truly mine." A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. "That I destroyed something precious out of jealousy." Catherine sat in silence, the map and key heavy in her hands. Outside, the thunder grew closer, promising a storm that might break the drought at last. "Eagle Shadow knows about the silver?" she asked finally. Thomas shook his head slightly. "No one knows. Not even Margaret. My last secret, and my last inheritance," Catherine said softly, tucking the map and key carefully into her pocket. Thomas's eyes had drifted closed again, his breathing growing more labored. The mother-of-pearl box sat open on the bedside table, the image of Elizabeth and Swift Arrow, a silent witness to promises broken and the possibility of new ones yet to be made. "I'll make this right," Catherine whispered, though whether to Thomas or to the couple in the photograph, even she couldn't say. The storm broke in the early hours of the morning, rain lashing against the windows of the Winters ranch house. Catherine stood in the doorway of Thomas's room, watching as Margaret closed his unseeing eyes with gentle fingers. He had slipped away during the night, his last words a whispered apology to a woman, 18 years dead. "He's at peace now," Margaret said softly, drawing the sheet over Thomas's face. Whatever his sins, Catherine felt strangely hollow, her emotions a tangled knot she couldn't unravel. This man had stolen her from her true heritage, had murdered her father, had lied to her throughout her life, yet had also raised her, educated her, and in his final act, given her the means to protect her mother's people. "I need to tell Eagle Shadow," she said, turning from the doorway. She found him in the barn, already aware of Thomas's passing. The connection between life and death was something the Apache understood intimately, the transition sensed rather than announced. "His journey to the spirit world will not be easy," Eagle Shadow said, his voice neither gloating nor sympathetic. "No," Catherine agreed. "Too many unresolved debts." She withdrew the map from her pocket, spreading it on a hay bale between them. As she explained Thomas's final revelation, Eagle Shadow's expression remained carefully neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "Silver," he said finally, "the white man's hunger for it has destroyed many tribes. This could be different." Catherine traced the boundary line on the map. "If I control the claim, I can use it to negotiate protection for your people." Eagle Shadow studied her face. "You would use Thomas Winter's last secret to save those he sought to destroy. I would use my inheritance to protect my family," she corrected. "Both sides of it." A sound at the barn door interrupted them. Sheriff Wilson stood there, water dripping from his hat brim, his deputy a shadowy presence behind him. "Heard about Thomas," he said without preamble. "My condolences." "Thank you, Sheriff." Catherine discreetly folded the map, tucking it away. Wilson's gaze shifted to Eagle Shadow, his expression hardening. "Surprised to find you still here, Indian. Would have thought you'd be heading back to warn your people about the army's plans." "The Apache have done nothing to warrant military action," Catherine interjected. "The raid on the Miller family wasn't the only one," Wilson cut her off. "2 more homesteads hit yesterday. 8 people dead, including children." The news landed like a physical blow. Eagle Shadow's face darkened. "My people are not responsible. Tell that to the army captain who arrived in town last night." Wilson adjusted his gun belt. "He's not much interested in distinguishing between good Indians and bad Indians at this point." After the sheriff departed, Catherine and Eagle Shadow exchanged troubled looks. "I need to return to the camp," he said. "If soldiers are coming, I'll come with you." Catherine's decision was instant. "After we bury Thomas," they laid Thomas Winters to rest. That afternoon, in the small family plot where Elizabeth had been buried years before, the rain had eased to a gentle patter, the parched earth drinking deeply after years of drought. Only Catherine, Margaret, Eagle Shadow, and the preacher from town stood beside the grave as the simple service concluded. As they turned to leave, Catherine noticed a small leather pouch hanging from a nearby juniper tree, a traditional Apache offering to help guide the dead safely to the spirit world. She glanced at Eagle Shadow, who nodded once in acknowledgement. "Even those who walk crooked paths may find straight ones in the end," he said quietly. Back at the house, Catherine changed into riding clothes and packed lightly. As she prepared to leave with Eagle Shadow, Margaret pressed something into her hands, a beaded necklace of intricate design, turquoise and silver glinting among the colorful glass beads. "Your mother wore this when she married Thomas," Margaret explained, "but she told me once it was made for her by the women of Swift Arrow's tribe when they thought she would marry him instead." Catherine examined the necklace, recognizing the Apache patterns interwoven with designs more familiar to white settlers, a perfect blending of both worlds, like Catherine herself. "She was trying to bridge two cultures, just as you are now," Margaret continued. "She didn't succeed, but perhaps you can finish what she began." Catherine slipped the necklace over her head, feeling its weight settle against her collarbone. "Thank you for keeping this safe all these years." "There's something else you should know," Margaret said, her voice dropping. "Those raids the sheriff mentioned, I overheard Hawkins at the funeral. He and some of the Circle Crown boys were in town when it happened, bragging about playing Indian to stir up trouble." Catherine's blood ran cold. "They're framing the Apache to provoke the army." "I believe so." Margaret's eyes were troubled. "Be careful, child. There are powerful interests who want the Apache gone, and that land cleared for mining and grazing." As Catherine mounted her horse, the beaded necklace caught the emerging sunlight, scattering prisms of color like a promise. The storm had passed, but darker clouds gathered on the horizon as she and Eagle Shadow rode toward the Apache camp, racing against time and deliberate malice. They rode hard through the afternoon, following trails only Eagle Shadow could discern. The rain had transformed the landscape, releasing the scent of sage and bringing dormant wildflowers to sudden, vibrant life. In another time, Catherine might have marveled at the desert's rebirth. Now she could think only of reaching the Apache camp before the soldiers did. "We should arrive by nightfall," Eagle Shadow said as they paused to rest the horses. "If the rain holds off, we can." He went silent suddenly, his head tilting as he listened to something beyond Catherine's perception. Riders, coming fast. They retreated into a stand of juniper trees, watching as a group of mounted men crested a nearby ridge. Catherine recognized the lead rider immediately. Hawkins, the Circle M foreman, his scarred face distinctive even at a distance. The men were heavily armed, rifles slung across their backs and pistols at their hips. "The raiders," Catherine whispered. Margaret was right. Eagle Shadow's expression hardened as he took in the war paint smeared across Hawkins' face, a crude, offensive approximation of Apache markings. "They mean to attack again, disguised as my people. We have to stop them." Catherine started forward, but Eagle Shadow caught her arm. "They outnumber us 5-1, and they would kill without hesitation to keep their secret." His voice was low but firm. "We must reach the camp first. Prepare our people." Reluctantly, Catherine nodded. They circled wide to avoid Hawkins and his men, adding precious time to their journey. When they finally approached the Apache camp, night had fallen, the moon casting silver light across the rain-washed landscape. The camp was in a state of controlled urgency. News of the raids had reached them through their own scouts, and Whitehawk had already called a council to discuss their options. Catherine and Eagle Shadow dismounted amid a flurry of questions and concerned look. "The soldiers come," Running Fox reported, approaching them immediately. "Our scouts saw them on the North Road, perhaps a day's ride from here, and there are raiders disguised as Apache," Catherine added. "We saw them on our way, Hawkins and men from the Circle M." Murmurs of anger rippled through the gathering crowd. Morning Star stepped forward, her face grim. "We should strike first, before the soldiers arrive. Show them we are not to be herded like cattle." "No," Catherine countered. "That's exactly what Hawkins wants, to provoke violence that will justify the army's actions." Whitehawk emerged from his dwelling, moving slowly but with purpose. In his gnarled hands he carried a weathered cavalry officer's saber, its brass hilt tarnished with age but its blade still gleaming in the firelight. "This belonged to the father of Elizabeth Harris," the old man said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "She brought it among us as a symbol of her trust. Many years ago, Catherine accepted the saber with reverence, recognizing it as her maternal grandfather's weapon from the Civil War. Her mother had kept it displayed in their home until her death, after which Thomas had stored it away, unable to bear the reminder of his wife's heritage. "How did you come to have this?" she asked. "Elizabeth entrusted it to me when she feared Thomas might destroy it," White Hawk explained. "She asked that I keep it safe until it could be returned to her child, to you, when the time was right." Catherine drew the blade partly from its scabbard, reading the inscription etched into the steel: "Courage in adversity, mercy in victory." Her grandfather's motto, passed down through generations. "The time for this blade has come again," White Hawk continued. "Not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of authority. The white soldiers will recognize it as an officer's sword. It may give them pause long enough to hear words of peace." Running Fox scoffed. "Peace? When they come with guns and relocation orders?" "I have something that may change their calculations," Catherine said, drawing forth the map Thomas had given her. As the tribal council gathered, she explained about the silver deposit and her plan to use it as leverage. "The land is legally mine now, including the silver. If I negotiate with the territorial government to allow the Apache to remain as partners in developing the mine, under my protection as landowner, the white authorities would never accept such an arrangement," Morning Star objected. "Silver speaks louder than prejudice," Catherine replied. "And I have something else they want. A solution to the Apache problem that doesn't involve costly military action or the shame of broken treaties." Eagle Shadow studied the map thoughtfully. "It could work, but first we must prevent the false raids that Hawkins plans. If more settlers die at the hands of Apache, no negotiation will be possible." Catherine gripped her grandfather's saber, its weight unfamiliar yet somehow right in her hand. "Then we stop Hawkins first, expose his deception, and force the army to negotiate rather than attack." As the council debated strategies into the night, Catherine felt the convergence of her dual heritage, her mother's diplomatic wisdom and her biological father's unwavering courage, now joined with Thomas's final, unexpected gift. The cavalry saber at her side represented a new kind of authority, not military might, but the moral force of truth and justice that might yet bridge the chasm between two worlds. Before dawn, the Apache camp transformed with practiced efficiency. Women packed essential supplies while men prepared weapons, not for battle, but for the defense that might become necessary. Children were sent with the elderly to a hidden canyon that had sheltered the tribe during previous conflicts. Catherine watched the preparations with a growing sense of resolve. She had changed into clothing that reflected her dual heritage, a white settler's riding skirt, paired with a beaded Apache vest given to her by Singing Bird. At her hip hung her grandfather's saber, and across her chest, a bandolier of ammunition for the rifle she now checked methodically. "Our scouts have located Hawkins and his men," Eagle Shadow reported, approaching with Running Fox at his side. "They camp near the Henderson homestead, 12 miles east. They appear to be preparing for another raid." "The Hendersons have 3 young children," Catherine said, her stomach tightening with dread. Running Fox's expression was grim. "The soldiers are also advancing, but they move slowly with their wagons. They will not arrive until tomorrow." Eagle Shadow laid out the strategy they had developed during the night council. "A small party will intercept Hawkins before they can reach the Henderson place. We must capture them alive with evidence of their deception." "I'm coming with you," Catherine said, her tone brooking no argument. "I expected nothing less." Eagle Shadow's brief smile held pride rather than condescension. As they prepared to depart, White Hawk approached. In his hands he carried a wooden box decorated with intricate carvings and inlaid turquoise. Catherine recognized the designs as matching those on her mother's music box. "For generations our people have used sacred pigments to prepare for important journeys," the old man explained, opening the box to reveal compartments filled with colored powders: white, yellow, blue and red ochre. "Today you stand at the threshold between worlds, belonging fully to both, yet bound by neither." He dipped his finger into the white clay, drawing a single line down Catherine's forehead for clear vision to see truth through deception. Next came yellow ochre across her cheekbones for the courage to stand firm when others falter. Blue pigment at her temples for wisdom to find the path of peace. Finally, red ochre at her chin for the voice that speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. The ceremony complete, White Hawk closed the paint box. Swift Arrow would be proud of his daughter today. Go with our blessings. Morning Star stepped forward, surprising Catherine by offering her a deerskin water pouch. Return safely, she said simply. Our people need you now. Their small party rode out as the sun crested the eastern mountains. Catherine, Eagle Shadow, Running Fox and 3 warriors chosen for their tracking skills. They traveled swiftly but cautiously, aware that Hawkins and his men could have scouts watching for pursuit. The face markings, Catherine said as they rode. They're not war paint. Eagle Shadow nodded. War paint is for battle. These markings are for transformation, a ritual usually reserved for those undertaking a sacred journey or assuming a new role within the tribe. White Hawk honors you, Running Fox added, his earlier antagonism notably absent. Few outsiders have received such recognition. I'm not an outsider, Catherine replied quietly. Not anymore. They reached a ridge overlooking the area where Hawkins and his men had been spotted. Dismounting, they crept forward to observe the camp below. Catherine counted 8 men, Hawkins among them, painting their faces with crude approximations of Apache war markings. Their horses were loaded with supplies and extra weapons. They prepare to attack soon, Eagle Shadow whispered. We must act quickly. Catherine studied the layout of the camp, an idea forming. We need to separate them, divide their strength. Using the paint box's dixment still visible on her skin, Catherine sketched a rough map in the dirt. Here's what I propose. The plan was simple but effective. 2 warriors would create a distraction to the north, drawing off some of Hawkins. Meanwhile, Catherine, Eagle Shadow, and Running Fox would approach from the south, using the element of surprise to capture Hawkins himself, the key to exposing the truth. As they moved into position, Catherine touched the ritual markings on her face, drawing strength from their meaning. The cavalry saber at her side and the rifle in her hands represented the convergence of her 2 bloodlines, the military precision of her white ancestors and the fierce protection of her Apache heritage. She caught Eagle Shadow, watching her, his expression thoughtful. You have become who you were always meant to be, he said softly, the bridge between worlds that your parents dreamed of creating. Below them, Hawkins shouted orders to his men, unaware that his deception was about to be exposed. Catherine chambered a round in her rifle, the distinctive click echoing her determination. The paint box's blessing seemed to hum against her skin as she prepared to confront the man whose lies threatened both sides of her family. For both my peoples, she whispered, and signaled for the plan to begin. The diversion worked perfectly. 2 of the Apache warriors created a commotion to the north, drawing away 3 of Hawkins' men who rode out to investigate. With the odds more even, Catherine, Eagle Shadow, and Running Fox advanced through the scrub brush toward the remaining raiders. Remember, Catherine whispered, we need Hawkins alive, with evidence. They were within 50 yards of the camp when disaster struck. A previously unseen sentry spotted their approach and fired a warning shot. Instantly, the element of surprise was lost. Apache, the man shouted. Real ones. Hawkins and his men scrambled for cover, grabbing weapons. Kill them all, Hawkins ordered. No witnesses. Eagle Shadow pushed Catherine behind a boulder as bullets kicked up dust around them. So much for the peaceful approach, he said grimly. Running Fox had taken position behind a juniper tree and returned fire, his shot catching one of the raiders in the shoulder. The man went down screaming. We need to separate Hawkins from the others, Catherine said, checking her rifle. Eagle Shadow nodded. Running Fox and I will circle around. Can you keep them pinned down? Go! Catherine sighted down her rifle and began firing methodically, forcing the raiders to keep their heads down as Eagle Shadow and Running Fox disappeared into the brush. For several minutes the exchange of gunfire continued. Catherine was careful with her shots, aiming to disable rather than kill. One by one, the Apache warriors who had created the diversion returned, joining the fight from different positions to create the impression of a larger force. Suddenly she heard shouting from the far side of the camp. Eagle Shadow and Running Fox had successfully flanked the raiders and were now engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Catherine used the distraction to advance, working her way closer to where Hawkins was barking orders to his remaining men. A movement to her right caught her attention. One of the raiders was aiming at Running Fox, who was occupied with another opponent. Without hesitation, Catherine swung her rifle and fired. The man dropped, clutching his leg. The battle was chaotic but brief. Within minutes, 3 raiders were wounded, 1 had fled, and the remaining 2 had surrendered. Hawkins alone continued to fight, his face contorted with rage beneath the fake Apache war paint. "It's over, Hawkins," Catherine called out, advancing with her rifle trained on him. "Throw down your weapon." Instead, Hawkins fired wildly in her direction. The bullet whizzed past her ear as Eagle Shadow tackled him from behind. The 2 men grappled in the dust, Hawkins fighting with the desperation of a man who knew his crimes had been discovered. With a sudden, vicious move, Hawkins drew a hidden knife and slashed at Eagle Shadow, opening a cut across his forearm. Eagle Shadow fell back, momentarily stunned, as Hawkins scrambled to his feet and lunged toward Catherine. Time seemed to slow. Catherine dropped her rifle and drew her grandfather's cavalry saber in one fluid motion. The blade caught the morning sunlight as she deflected Hawkins' knife, thrust with practiced precision. A move she had learned during fencing lessons in Boston, now deployed in desperate combat. Hawkins' momentum carried him past her. As he turned for another attack, Catherine brought the saber's pommel down hard on his wrist. The knife fell from his numbed fingers as she leveled the blade at his throat. "It's finished," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Hatred burned in Hawkins' eyes. "You race traitor," he spat. "Siding with savages against your own kind." "My kind includes both peoples," Catherine replied. "Something you could never understand." As Running Fox secured Hawkins with rawhide bindings, Catherine turned her attention to Eagle Shadow's wound. The cut was long but not deep. She tore a strip from her petticoat to bind it. "Your grandfather's blade served you well," Eagle Shadow observed, watching her work. "As did your training," she replied. "We make a good team." Among the raiders' supplies, they discovered damning evidence, Apache-style arrowheads and tomahawks to plant at the scene, along with scalping knives and a journal detailing their previous attack. "This should convince even the most skeptical army officer," Catherine said, securing the journal inside her vest. A metallic glint caught her eye. Half buried in Hawkins' saddlebag was a United States Marshal's badge, not a replica but authentic government issue. "He's a marshal?" Catherine asked incredulously, holding up the badge. Eagle Shadow examined it grimly. "Perhaps, or perhaps this is stolen, to add authority to his deception." Running Fox approached, leading their horses. "We should return to camp. The soldiers will arrive by midday tomorrow." Catherine pocketed the marshal's badge, her mind racing with implications. If Hawkins had official connections, their task had just become far more complicated. But the badge also represented legitimate federal authority, something that might prove useful in the negotiations to come. They secured the prisoners and gathered the evidence, preparing for the journey back to the Apache camp. The ritual paint on Catherine's face had smudged during the fight, but remained visible, a symbol of her commitment to both justice and peace, as the confrontation with the army loomed ahead. "What will you tell the soldiers?" Running Fox asked as they mounted their horses. Catherine touched the marshal's badge in her pocket. "The truth, and then we'll see if truth is still powerful enough to overcome greed. 1 month later, Catherine stood on the porch of the Winters ranch house, watching riders approach along the newly widened road. The changes of the past weeks were visible everywhere, from the fresh construction near the silver mine to the mixed group of Apache and settler workers moving easily between tasks. "They're here," she called over her shoulder. Inside, Eagle Shadow adjusted the formal buckskin shirt he wore for important occasions. The wound on his arm had healed well, leaving only a faint scar. Beside him, White Hawk sat in quiet dignity, his ancient face serene, despite the significance of the day. The territorial governor himself, Running Fox, observed, joining Catherine on the porch. "You have accomplished much, Swift Arrow's daughter." The journey to this moment had not been easy. When the army arrived at the Apache camp, Catherine had faced Captain James Porter, with evidence of Hawkins' deception, the journal, the fake Apache weapons, and the testimony of the captured raiders. Initially skeptical, Porter's attitude had changed upon examining the marshal's badge. "Marshal Davis was reported missing 3 months ago," he had said grimly. "Hawkins must have killed him and taken his badge." The revelation had turned the tide. Porter, an honorable man despite his orders, had agreed to delay the forced relocation, while Catherine presented her alternative proposal to his superiors. The silver deposit had captured the territorial government's attention immediately, just as she had hoped. Now, after weeks of negotiation, the governor had come to formalize the unprecedented agreement. The official party dismounted, and Catherine stepped forward to greet them. "Governor Stanton, welcome to Silver Creek Cooperative." The name had been chosen deliberately, no longer the Winters Ranch, but a new entity that recognized the partnership between settler and Apache interests. "Miss Winters," the governor acknowledged with a nod. "Or should I say Miss Swift Arrow now?" "Catherine is sufficient," she replied with a smile. "Please come inside, we have much to discuss." In the ranch house parlor, now serving as an official meeting room, a large table had been prepared with the formal agreement documents. But it was what hung on the wall behind the table that drew the governor's attention, a framed parchment document, its ornate script still clearly legible despite its age. "Is that what I think it is?" Governor Stanton asked, approaching the document with undisguised interest. "The original Spanish land grant from 1797, Catherine confirmed. "Margaret found it among my mother's possessions. It specifically recognizes the rights of the indigenous peoples to inhabit and use these lands in perpetuity, alongside Spanish settlers." The document had been the final piece that strengthened their legal position. Discovered just days after the confrontation with Hawkins, it predated all subsequent American treaties and land arrangements. "Most impressive," the governor murmured, examining the faded wax seal. "This certainly adds weight to your rather unusual proposal." They gathered around the table, representatives from both worlds. Catherine sat at the head, with Eagle Shadow on her right and the governor on her left, a physical embodiment of the bridge she had become. "The terms are straightforward," she explained, opening the modern agreement that would supplement the historical grant. "The silver mine will operate as a cooperative venture, with profits shared between the U.S. government, the Apache tribe, and Silver Creek as the administering entity. In exchange, the Apache will retain their traditional lands under federal protection, exempt from the relocation orders. A most unconventional arrangement," Governor Stanton remarked, though his tone was not disapproving, but perhaps appropriate for these unconventional times. The signing proceeded with formal dignity. White Hawk made his mark alongside the governor's flourishing signature. Eagle Shadow signed his name in both English and Apache characters. Catherine signed last, completing the circle that had begun with her mother's fateful meeting with Swift Arrow, nearly 3 decades earlier. As the official party departed with their copies of the agreement, Catherine remained on the porch with Eagle Shadow and White Hawk, watching the dust settle on the road. "Your parents would be proud," White Hawk said softly. "The circle is complete." Eagle Shadow nodded his agreement. "Swift Arrow's vision of peace between our people's lives through you." Catherine touched the Spanish land grant document she now held. her copy of the centuries-old parchment that had helped save her mother's people. "Not just through me," she said, "through all of us who choose to see beyond blood and boundaries." The setting sun bathed the valley in golden light, illuminating both the Apache encampment to the west and the silver mine operations to the east. Workers of both cultures moved between the two worlds with growing ease, their children already playing together without the burden of ancient hatreds. "There will be challenges ahead," Eagle Shadow cautioned. "Not everyone embraces change." "Then we will face them together," Catherine replied. "As family." She looked out over the land that had witnessed so much pain and promise, the land where her blood had been divided and was now reunited. The Spanish grant in her hands represented not just legal rights, but the weight of history redeemed through understanding and courage. As twilight deepened into dusk, Catherine Swift Arrow Winters stood at the threshold between worlds, no longer forced to choose between them, but rather empowered to bring them together, fulfilling at last her parents' dream of a circle unbroken.